This is Land of Havilah, Ecclesiastes, chapter 2 of 12. In chapter 1, Solomon said, "Life's the same old dreary experience day after day." He said all things are full of weariness in verse 8, meaning he's tired of it all. Everything done in the past is meaningless because as soon as a generation passes away, no one remembers anything they did anymore, anything about their struggles and accomplishments. It's all erased. And whatever anyone in the future does will be forgotten as well as time rolls on. So what's the point? He called the pursuit of wisdom and understanding an unhappy business in verse 13. Though he had head knowledge as much as anyone, he still couldn't solve life's biggest issues. With his knowledge, still that which was crooked couldn't be made straight, and that which was lacking couldn't be counted. In other words, his education didn't do anything to solve life's issues. There was always the allure that if he could just add to his knowledge and his philosophical understanding of life, he'd eventually hit on something that would make him happy. But he kept learning and never found it. In fact, the more he learned, the more unsatisfied he was. Quote, "For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow." End quote. His problem was that he was operating in the realm of his mind, which is fine and which is necessary and which is helpful in many regards, but he was experiencing a drought in terms of his relationship with God. So since filling his head with education only made him more empty in chapter 1, coming up in chapter 2 now, he also tried self-indulgence. Verse 1. "I said in my heart, 'Come now, I'll test you with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure.' And behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, 'It is foolishness,' and of mirth, 'What does it accomplish?'" Comment, he said to himself, "I'll just concentrate on being happy." But it didn't work. He couldn't manufacture happiness. Coming up, he started drinking and pursuing various interests. Verse 3. "I searched in my heart how to cheer my flesh with wine, my heart yet guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold of folly, until I might see what it was good for the sons of men that they should do under heaven all the days of their lives. I made myself great works. I built myself houses. I planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and parks, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruit. I made myself pools of water, to water from it the forest where trees were reared. I bought male and female servants and had servants born in my house. I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, above all who were before me in Jerusalem." Comment in verses 2 to 7 we just read, alcohol and keeping himself busy with various projects and hobbies didn't help. Verse 8. "I also gathered silver and gold for myself, and the treasure of kings and of the provinces. I got myself male and female singers, and the delights of the sons of men, musical instruments, and that of all sorts. So I was great and increased more than all who were before me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also remained with me." Comment in verse 9, he was still wise. Lack of wisdom wasn't the problem. He gathered more wealth in verse 8, more silver and gold. That didn't help. He provided himself with world-class entertainment in verse 8, male and female singers, accompanied with musical instruments of all sorts, still the same emptiness. In verse 9, he had more than anyone in the history of Jerusalem, and it didn't benefit him. Verse 10, "Whatever my eyes desired, I didn't keep from them. I didn't withhold my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced because of all my labor, and this was my portion from all my labor. Then I looked at all the works that my hands had worked, and at the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and a chasing after wind, and there was no profit under the sun." Comment in verse 10, he got some benefit from his activities, quote, "For my heart rejoiced because of all my labor," end quote. But it was only temporary in verse 11 because he stepped back and evaluated everything, and it was all vanity, all vapor. There was no profit in it. He got nothing from it. Coming up, he'll use his great wisdom to evaluate his progress so far. Verse 12. "I turned myself to consider wisdom, madness, and folly, for what can the king's successor do? Just that which has been done long ago. Then I saw that wisdom excels folly as far as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, and the fool walks in darkness, and yet I perceive that one event happens to them all. Comment in verse 12, the thought crossed his mind that since nothing he did made him feel any better, maybe he could find meaning in trying to make life better for his successor, but he quickly dismissed that idea because he couldn't make his own life any better. What could a successor do to make himself happy? Just that which has already been tried in verse 12. In verse 13 he says, wisdom excels folly like light excels darkness. Wisdom's better than folly for sure. But no matter who you are, a fool or a wise man, both are in the same unhappy condition. Verse 15. Then I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, so will it happen even to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise man, even as of the fool, there's no memory forever, since in the days to come all will have long been forgotten. Indeed, the wise man must die, just like the fool. So I hated life, because the work that's worked under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and a chasing after wind. Comment, he says being wise is better than being a fool, no doubt, but what does it really matter, since wisdom and foolishness are nothing but alternate pathways to the same place, which is death? He hated life in verse 17 because it seems to be set up to mock a man no matter what he does. Verse 18. I hated all my labor in which I labored under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who comes after me. Who knows whether he'll be a wise man or a fool? Yet he'll have rule over all my labor in which I've labored, and in which I've shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. Comment, he says, when I die, everything I've accumulated will go to someone else. Who knows if he'll be a wise man or a fool? Whichever he is, he'll rule over all that's mine. It doesn't seem right. Verse 20. Therefore I began to cause my heart to despair concerning all the labor in which I had labored under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is with wisdom, with knowledge, and with skillfulness, yet he shall leave it for his portion to a man who's not labored for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. Comment, he says someone can build an empire with all his labor, skill, and dedication. Then it passes to some fool who didn't lift a finger for it. It's a great evil in verse 21. And what did I get from it? Verse 22. For what has a man of all his labor and of the striving of his heart in which he labors under the sun? For all his days are sorrows, and his travail is grief. Yes, even in the night his heart takes no rest. This also is vanity. Comment, he says, all that work by my blood, sweat, and tears, and all I get is sorrow, travail, grief, and restlessness of heart. Even at night I can't relax and be satisfied for a minute. Quote, even in the night his heart takes no rest. End quote. So chuck it, he says, coming up, verse 24. There's nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink and make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw that it's from the hand of God. Comment in verse 24, he says the smartest thing he's said so far, that satisfaction is from the hand of God. God either gives it or he doesn't. If he doesn't give it, you won't have it. Verse 25. For who can eat and who can have enjoyment more than I? For to the man who pleases him, God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner he gives travail, to gather and to heap up, that he may give to him who pleases God. This also is vanity and a chasing after wind. Comment, Solomon was the richest king around, 1 Kings 3:13. Therefore, in verse 25, he could eat better and afford more diversions than anyone, yet he wasn't satisfied, which he says proves his point that you can't buy happiness. It only comes from God. He says in verse 26, if you please God, he'll give you wisdom, knowledge, and joy, which is very true and scriptural, but he's admitting all along in this book there's no joy for him personally, nothing but dissatisfaction and consternation. He's unable to explain why God's blessing of joy in verse 26 doesn't apply to him. We do know that later in life he wasn't wholly true to God, 1 Kings 11:4, and maybe already as he wrote this book his faith was on the decline, which would explain his problem. For the believer blessed by God in his heart and soul as God promises to bless us, life is definitely not a vain chasing after wind. If a person isn't experiencing inner peace, satisfaction, and fulfillment, he should pursue God. He won't solve the problems of the soul through expansion of his mind, through new knowledge, education, diversions, projects, accomplishments, alcohol, drugs, self-indulgence, entertainment, or by building a better future for his children. Solomon tried all that, and it didn't work. Ecclesiastes 3 is next.